The stars looked different when you owned them. Fleet Admiral Thexral stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching another star system come into view. This one was called Sol by the primitive creatures who lived there. Soon it would just be another number in the Vorthak Empire's records. 300 years. That's how long the Vorthak had been taking worlds. 412 star systems now belonged to them. Each conquest had been easier than the last. The pattern never changed. Arrive, demand surrender, crush any resistance, move on. Most species gave up without a fight. The smart ones knew they couldn't win. "Admiral," his aide spoke quietly. "We're approaching the target system." Thexral nodded. He had read the reports about these humans. They were young, barely out of their home world. Their technology was laughable. Solid metal projectiles for weapons, basic energy shields, ships that moved slowly through space like ancient sailing vessels. "How many ships do they have?" he asked. "Intelligence reports maybe 50 combat vessels total. Most are small patrol ships, nothing larger than what we would call a light cruiser." Thexral almost smiled. His invasion fleet had 12 capital ships, each one bigger than anything the humans had ever built. This would be over in hours. Far away, on the human ship called Indomitable, Commander Day-Ho was having a very bad day. The warning had come from the outer sensor stations 3 hours ago. 12 massive ships were heading straight for Earth. Ships bigger than anything humans had ever seen. Captain Minho stood in the center of the bridge, his face calm, but his eyes worried. The crew worked around him, checking weapons and shields. Everyone knew this was different from their training exercises. "How long until they reach us?" Minho asked. 6 hours at their current speed," answered Navigator Tae-hyun. His fingers moved quickly over his controls. "They're not trying to hide. They want us to see them coming." In the engine room, Chief Engineer Hye-jin was making final checks on their experimental quantum drive. Her hands shook slightly as she worked. The drive had never been tested in real combat. Today, it would either save them or kill them all. "Hye-jin, to bridge," she spoke into her communicator. "The quantum drive is ready. But, Captain, I have to warn you again. We don't know what will happen if we use it." Minho's voice came back steady and sure. "We'll worry about that when the time comes. Right now, just make sure it works." Back on the Vorthak flagship, Thexral was reading more reports about the humans. What he read confused him. These creatures had spent most of their history fighting each other. They had weapons designed to kill their own kind. They had something called wars that lasted for years. "Why do they fight so much?" he asked his intelligence officer. "We're not sure, Admiral. Our scientists think it might be a mental disorder. Most civilized species stop fighting among themselves once they reach space travel." Thexral found this disturbing. A species that fought itself constantly would surely be weak when facing a real enemy. The Vorthak had conquered peaceful traders, logical scientists, and artistic dreamers. All had surrendered quickly when they saw Vorthak power. On Earth, Admiral So Young was in an emergency meeting with the Defense Council. The room was full of worried faces and urgent voices. Everyone knew what was coming. "We have 47 ships ready for combat," reported General Wu Jin. "The Indomitable is our best vessel, but even it is tiny compared to what's heading our way." "What about our ground defenses?" asked So Young. "Ready. But if they get past our ships, the planet won't last long." So Young looked at the star map showing the approaching enemy fleet. 12 red dots moving toward one blue dot. It looked hopeless. "We have one advantage," she said quietly. They don't know us. Every species they've fought before gave up or lost quickly. They think we'll do the same. Will we? Asked General Wu Jin. So Young's eyes were hard as steel. No. We fight. Communications Officer Jae-woo was at his station on the Indomitable when the first message came. It wasn't sent to them directly. The aliens were broadcasting to all Avors. Earth. People of Earth, the translated message said. You are now part of the Vorthak Empire. Surrender your military forces and prepare for occupation. Resistance will result in the destruction of your species. The bridge went quiet. Everyone looked at Captain Min-ho. He walked slowly to Jae-woo's station and took the communicator. This is Captain Min-ho of the Earth Defense Ship Indomitable, he said. Message received and understood. He paused for a moment, then added, We decline. Jae-woo stared at him. Sir, should I send that? Send it. The message traveled through space to the Vorthak fleet. When it reached Thexral's ship, the translation computers worked for several minutes. Finally, the message appeared on his screen. We decline. Thexral read it 3 times. Then he called his intelligence officer. What does this mean? He demanded. We're not sure, Admiral. It's possible their translation systems are malfunctioning. Send the surrender demand again. Make it clearer. The second message was longer and more detailed. It explained exactly what would happen if the humans didn't surrender. It listed the punishments for resistance. It showed images of other worlds that had been destroyed. Min-ho's response was shorter this time. No. On the Vorthak ship, the senior officers gathered around Thexral. None of them had ever seen anything like this. Perhaps they don't understand the situation, suggested one officer. Perhaps they're insane, said another. Thexral was beginning to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: uncertainty. Every other species had responded with either immediate surrender or desperate pleas for mercy. These humans seemed to be doing neither. Admiral, his tactical officer reported. One of their ships is moving toward us. One ship? Thexral almost laughed. How many crew does it carry? Approximately 200 beings, sir. Thexral looked at his fleet. 12 ships, 60,000 Vorthak warriors, the best weapons in the galaxy. And the humans were sending one small ship with 200 crew members to fight them. Are they delivering their surrender in person? He wondered aloud. Sir, the tactical officer said carefully, their ship is armed and their weapons are powered up. The bridge fell silent. 200 humans were coming to fight 60,000. Vorthak. It was either the bravest thing Thexral had ever seen or the most stupid. Maintain course, he ordered. Let's see what these creatures are planning. But deep in his mind, a small voice was asking a question he didn't want to hear. What if they're not planning to lose? The space between stars had never felt so empty. Captain Min-ho watched the main screen as the Vorthak fleet grew larger. 12 ships that looked like floating cities, each one bristling with weapons. His own ship, the Indomitable, was like a rowboat facing a hurricane. Distance to enemy fleet? He asked. 2 million kilometers and closing, replied Navigator Tae-hyun. His voice was steady, but his hands gripped his controls tightly. Communications Officer Jae-woo looked up from his station. Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the Vorthak. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was deep and cold. The translation system made it sound almost human, but there was something alien underneath that made everyone uncomfortable. Small human vessel. You approach our fleet with weapons active. This is unwise. Return to your planet and prepare for occupation. This is your final warning. Minho walked to the center of the bridge. Around him, his crew waited for orders. In the engine room, he knew Hyejin was watching her instruments. In the medical bay, Dr. Eunji was preparing for the worst. Throughout the ship, 200 humans were about to face an enemy that had conquered the galaxy. Jae-woo, open a channel, Minho said. Channel open, sir. This is Captain Minho of the Earth vessel Indomitable. We have received your warnings and understand your position. However, this is our star system. These are our worlds. Our people live here. We will not abandon them. He paused, looking around at his crew. Young Mai at the weapons station, Hyun Woo at tactical, Tae Hyun at navigation. Good people, brave people. We offer you this chance to leave peacefully, Minho continued. Turn your ships around and go back where you came from. We have no quarrel with you, but we will not surrender our home. The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Vorthak flagship, Fleet Admiral Thexeral stared at the communication panel in disbelief. Did they just offer us a chance to surrender? Asked his aide. Thexeral had conquered 400 worlds. He had faced species with technology far beyond what these humans possessed. Some had been warriors, others had been peaceful. All had eventually bowed to Vorthak power, but none had ever spoken to him like this. Sir, his intelligence officer said carefully, perhaps they don't understand our military strength. Should we send them detailed scans of our fleet? They can see our ships, Thexeral replied slowly. They know how many we have. They know how big we are. He was quiet for a moment. And they still told us to leave. The truth was starting to dawn on him. These humans weren't confused. They weren't stupid. They were doing something that no species in 300 years had done. They were choosing to fight, despite impossible odds. Back on the Indomitable, Tactical Officer Young Mi was studying the enemy ships through their sensors. What she saw made her stomach tight with fear, but she forced herself to stay calm. Captain, I'm reading their weapon signatures. Energy cannon that could cut our ship in half. Missile systems with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Their shields are at least 10 times stronger than ours. What about weaknesses? Minho asked. Young Mai worked at her console for several minutes. Their ships are huge, sir. That makes them slow. And their formation is very organized. Too organized, maybe. If we could disrupt their pattern, we might have a chance, finished Weapons Officer Hyun Woo. But, sir, we're still just one ship. Minho smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Maybe that's exactly what we need to be. In space, the two forces moved closer together. The Vorthak fleet maintained perfect formation, their ships arranged in a pattern that had crushed every enemy they had ever faced. The Indomitable flew alone, looking tiny and helpless against the massive alien vessels. On Earth, Admiral So Young watched the confrontation through long-range sensors. The command center was quiet except for the soft beeping of computers and the worried breathing of her staff. Admiral, reported her communications officer. We're receiving updates from the Indomitable. Captain Minho is requesting permission to engage. So Young closed her eyes for a moment. She was about to give an order that might doom the human race or save it. Permission granted, she said. Tell Minho that Earth is proud of him and his crew. The message reached the Indomitable just as the Vorthak fleet came into weapons range. Captain Minho read it aloud to his bridge crew. Earth is proud of us, he said. Let's make sure they stay that way. All stations, prepare for combat. Engineer Hyojin's voice came from the engine room. Quantum drive is ready, Captain, but remember, we don't know what will happen. Understood. Medical. Are you ready? Dr. Yunji's voice was calm and professional. Medical bay prepared for casualties, sir. Weapons? All systems ready, Captain. Railguns loaded and targeting computers online. Navigation? Course plotted and ready to execute on your command, sir. Minho looked at the main screen one more time. 12 enemy ships filled his view now, their hulls dark against the stars. Weapon ports were opening along their sides like hungry mouths. This is it, he announced to his crew. Today we find out what humans are really made of. On the Vorthak flagship, Thexerol was giving his own orders. His ship captains were experienced warriors who had fought in dozens of campaigns. They knew how to destroy enemy vessels quickly and efficiently. Target their engines first, he commanded. Disable them, then demand surrender again. If they refuse, destroy them completely. Sir, his tactical officer said hesitantly. Regulations require us to offer terms one final time before opening fire. Thexeral nodded. It was proper military procedure, even if it seemed pointless now. Open a channel to the human ship. When the connection was established, Thexeral spoke in his most formal tone. Human vessel indomitable. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and your crew will be spared. Refuse, and you will be destroyed. What is your answer? The reply came without hesitation. Our answer is the same as before. No. Thexeral felt something cold settle in his chest. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever refused surrender when facing certain death. These humans were either the bravest creatures in the galaxy or the most insane. Very well, he said quietly. All ships, open fire. The space around Earth lit up with energy beams and missile trails. The largest space battle in human history had begun. And at its center, one small ship named Indomitable flew straight toward impossible odds, carrying 200 humans who had chosen to fight rather than kneel. The first energy beam cut through space like a sword of light. It struck the Indomitable's forward shields and spread across them in a shower of sparks. The ship shook, but it didn't break apart. On the Vorthak flagship, Tactical Officer Vextar stared at his readings in confusion. Sir, the human ship is still intact. Fleet Admiral Thexeral frowned. That beam should have cut the small vessel in half. Increase power. Target their engine section. 3 more beams lanced out from different Vorthak ships. They hit the Indomitable from multiple angles, lighting up its shields like a fireworks display. The human ship spun wildly from the impacts, but when the light faded, it was still there. Impossible, whispered Thexeral. On the Indomitable's bridge, Captain Minho picked himself up from the floor. The last hit had thrown everyone around like toys, but the ship's systems were still working. Damage report, he called out. Forward shields down to 60%, reported Young Mai from her tactical station. Hull integrity holding. Minor damage to Deck 3. How are our shields holding up so well? Minho asked. Engineer Hyojin's voice crackled over the intercom. The adaptive armor is working, Captain. Each hit teaches our shields how to handle the next one better. It's like the ship is learning to fight. Minho allowed himself a small smile. Human engineering at its finest. While other species built bigger guns, humans built smarter defenses. Hyun Woo, return fire. Show them what human weapons can do. Weapons Officer Hyun Woo had been waiting for this moment. His fingers moved over his controls with practiced precision. Railguns locked on target. Firing! The Indomitable's main guns spat metal slugs at incredible speed. No energy beams, no fancy plasma bolts. Just solid chunks of metal moving so fast they became invisible streaks across space. The slugs hit the nearest Vorthak cruiser's shields. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the shields flickered and died. The metal projectiles punched through the alien hull like paper, tearing massive holes in the ship's side. Alarms screamed on the Vorthak vessel as atmosphere vented into space. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, but the damage was done. The mighty Warship, designed to crush planets, had been crippled by chunks of metal fired from a ship 1/10 its size. "Report!" demanded Thexeral. "The Kethamore is badly damaged, sir. They're saying the human weapons went right through our shields." Thexeral couldn't believe what he was hearing. Vorthak's shields had stopped the crystalline energy lances of the Zephyrians. They had absorbed the bioplasma of the Nexari. How could simple metal projectiles penetrate them? "Sir," his science officer said nervously, "their weapons are purely kinetic. Our shields are designed to stop energy attacks. These solid projectiles are different." Different. Thexeral was learning to hate that word. Everything about these humans was different. The Indomitable was moving again, and its motion made no sense. Instead of fleeing or trying to maintain distance, it was weaving between the Vorthak ships in an erratic pattern that defied all military logic. "What are they doing?" Thexeral demanded. His tactical computer was trying to predict the human ship's next move, but the patterns kept changing. Just when it seemed the Indomitable would turn left, it dove down. When it should have retreated, it charged forward. On the human ship, Navigator Tae-hyun was flying by instinct more than instruments. "Captain, I'm trying to stay unpredictable. If they can't figure out where we're going, they can't target us effectively." "Keep it up," Minho replied, holding onto his chair as the ship rolled through another impossible maneuver. "Young Mi, what's our target situation?" "2 more Vorthak ships are moving to intercept, but Captain, they're having trouble coordinating their attacks. Our movement pattern is confusing their formations." This was exactly what Minho had hoped for. The Vorthak fought like a machine, precise, logical, efficient. But humans fought like humans. Creative, unpredictable, and slightly crazy. Another barrage of energy beams lit up the space around them. Most missed entirely, fooled by Tae-hyun's wild flying. One beam clipped their port shield, but the adaptive armor had learned from the previous hits. The shield held. "Hyunwoo, target the ship on our starboard side. Full spread." "Aye, sir." "Firing!" The railgun slugs hammered into the second Vorthak vessel. This time, the alien commander tried to rotate his ship to spread the damage, but human weapons were designed to punch through armor, not dance around it. The slugs tore through the ship's hull and found something vital. The Vorthak cruiser exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the battlefield. On the Vorthak flagship, panic was starting to set in. 2 ships damaged or destroyed, and the tiny human vessel was still fighting. Worse, it seemed to be getting better at avoiding their attacks. "All ships concentrate fire on the human vessel," Thexeral ordered. "I don't care if we have to use every weapon we have. Destroy it now." 10 Vorthak warships turned their guns on the Indomitable. The space around the human ship became a storm of energy beams and missile explosions. No ship should have been able to survive in that hurricane of destruction, but the Indomitable didn't just survive, it danced. Tae-hyun threw the ship through maneuvers that should have torn it apart. The artificial gravity systems screamed in protest, but they held. The crew was thrown around like rag dolls, but they stayed at their stations. In the medical Bay, Dr. Yunji was treating crew members who had been hurt by the wild flying. A young technician named Dong Wu had a broken arm from being thrown against a bulkhead. "Doctor, shouldn't I go to my damage control station?" he asked, trying to get up. "Not with that arm," Yunji replied firmly. "Your job right now is to heal." "But the ship needs every person working." Yunji looked at him with gentle eyes. "The ship needs every person alive and healthy. That's more important than any single task." It was a very human way of thinking. The Vorthak would have forced the injured technician back to work regardless of his pain. Efficiency over compassion. But humans understood that caring for each other made them stronger, not weaker. Back on the bridge, the impossible was happening. Despite being outnumbered 12-1, despite facing weapons that could destroy planets, the Indomitable was winning its fight. "Captain," reported young Mi, "2 enemy ships are retreating to regroup. 3 more are damaged and falling back. We're actually making them afraid of us." Minho looked at the tactical display. It seemed impossible, but the evidence was right there. The mighty Vorthak Empire, conquerors of 400 worlds, were being beaten by 1 human ship with 200 crew members. "Hiya, Jin, how's our quantum drive?" he asked. "Still ready, Captain." "But, sir, I'm reading something strange from the Vorthak ships. Their formations are breaking down. They're not fighting like a coordinated fleet anymore." Minho understood. The Vorthak had spent 300 years fighting enemies who behaved predictably. They had never faced an opponent who fought with creativity, desperation, and sheer, bloody-minded stubbornness. They had never fought humans before. "All right, people," Minho announced to his crew. "We've got their attention. Now let's show them what happens when you threaten Earth." The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the Vorthak had arrived, Minho believed they might actually have a chance to win. Fleet Admiral Thexral stood in the center of his command bridge, watching displays that showed something he had never seen before. His fleet was losing. Not just struggling, not taking heavy casualties, but actually losing to a single enemy. "Ship! Bring all remaining vessels to bear," he commanded, his voice tight with anger and confusion. "I want that human ship destroyed now." But even as he gave the order, Thexral knew something was wrong. His ships were moving slower than usual. His captains were hesitating before executing commands. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, Vorthak warriors were experiencing doubt. On the Indomitable, Communications Officer Jay Wu was monitoring multiple frequencies at once. His job had changed from diplomacy to intelligence gathering, and what he was hearing made him smile grimly. "Captain," he reported, "I'm picking up transmissions from the Vorthak fleet. They're arguing among themselves. Some captains want to retreat and regroup. Others are demanding reinforcements." Captain Minho felt a surge of hope. If the enemy was losing cohesion, then maybe, just maybe, they had a real chance. "What else are you hearing?" "Sir, they keep asking each other why we haven't surrendered yet. They seem genuinely confused by our tactics." Before Minho could respond, the space around them lit up with new contacts. But these weren't Vorthak ships. They were human vessels, emerging from hiding places throughout the solar system. Navigator Tai Hyun stared at his sensors in amazement. "Captain, we've got incoming friendlies. Multiple ships decloaking from the asteroid belt, the outer planet moons, even from behind solar collection satellites." "How many?" Minho asked. 37 ships and counting, sir. Admiral So Young has sprung the trap." Back on Earth, Admiral So Young watched her carefully planned ambush unfold. For months, human ships had been hiding throughout the solar system, powered down and drifting like debris. The Vorthak had been so focused on Earth's obvious defenses that they had missed the hidden fleet entirely. "All ships, this is Admiral So Young," she broadcast to the emerging fleet. "Execute Plan Hornet's Nest. Coordinate with the Indomitable and show these invaders what happens when they threaten our home." The Vorthak fleet suddenly found themselves surrounded. Ships that had seemed like dead space junk were powering up weapons and shields. The carefully planned invasion had become a chaotic battle with enemies on all sides. On the Vorthak flagship, alarms were screaming. "Admiral," shouted his tactical officer. "New contacts throughout the system. At least 40 human vessels, possibly more." Thexrel felt his confidence crumble completely. The humans had been planning this. While he thought he was dealing with a primitive species, they had been laying a trap that was now closing around his entire fleet. "How did we miss so many ships?" he demanded. "Sir, they were powered down completely. No heat signatures, no energy readings. They looked like space debris. It was a tactic the Vorthak had never encountered. Most species they fought tried to show their strength, hoping to intimidate the invaders. The humans had done the opposite, hiding their true capabilities until the perfect moment. The Indomitable was no longer fighting alone. Human ships poured out of their hiding places like angry bees from a disturbed hive. They were smaller than the Vorthak vessels, but they moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of careful planning. Chief Engineer Haye Jin's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, we're receiving tactical data from the fleet. Admiral So Young wants us to demonstrate the quantum drive." Minho grinned. The quantum drive was their secret weapon, untested but potentially devastating. "All right, Haye Jin. Let's see what your miracle machine can do." Quantum drive activating. In 3, 2, 1, engage! The Indomitable vanished. One moment it was trading fire with 3 Vorthak cruisers, the next it was gone completely. The alien ships fired at empty space while their sensors screamed confusion. "Where did they go?" Thexrol shouted. His answer came 5 seconds later when the Indomitable reappeared directly behind his flagship, so close that their hulls almost touched. The human ship opened fire at point-blank range, its railguns punching holes through the Vorthak vessel's rear shields. Before the flagship could turn to respond, the Indomitable vanished again. This time it appeared next to a damaged Vorthak cruiser, finishing it off with a precise salvo before disappearing once more. "They can teleport," whispered Thexrol's science officer. But it wasn't teleportation. In the Indomitable's engine room, Haye Jin was pushing her quantum drive to its limits. The device didn't move the ship through space in the traditional sense. Instead, it briefly shifted them into quantum space, allowing them to reappear anywhere within a few light seconds of their starting position. "Drive temperature is rising," she reported to the bridge. "We can do maybe 6 more jumps before we risk a containment failure." "Make them count," Minho replied. Around them, the battle was intensifying. Human ships swarmed the Vorthak fleet like wolves attacking a bear. They were smaller and individually weaker, but they fought with a ferocity that surprised their enemies. The human ship Defiance, commanded by Captain Subin, rammed a Vorthak destroyer that had been trying to escape. Both ships were destroyed in the collision, but Subin had transmitted a final message. "For Earth and humanity." It was the kind of sacrifice that made no sense to Vorthak military thinking. Why would anyone willingly die when retreat was possible? But to humans, some things were worth more than individual survival. On another front, the corvette Swift Strike, under Captain Jun Ho, was leading a group of smaller vessels in hit-and-run attacks. They would appear, fire everything they had, then scatter before the Vorthak could respond effectively. "Their coordination is impossible," complained a Vorthak captain to Thexral. "How can so many ships work together without constant communication?" The answer was something the Vorthak couldn't understand. Human crews had trained together for years. They knew each other's tactics, could predict each other's moves, and most importantly, they all shared the same desperate determination to protect their home. Navigator Tai Hyun was coordinating with the other human ships, sharing targeting data and movement patterns. "Captain, Admiral So Young is requesting we target the Vorthak command ship. She thinks if we can damage their flagship, their fleet coordination will collapse." "Then let's give the Admiral what she wants," Minho replied. "Hyejin, one more. Quantum jump. Put us right in front of their biggest ship." "Aye, sir. But, Captain, this will push the drive past safe limits." "Do it anyway." The Indomitable made its final quantum jump, appearing directly in front of the massive Vorthak flagship. For a moment, the two ships faced each other across a few kilometers of empty space. David and Goliath, preparing for their final confrontation. "All weapons fire!" Minho commanded. Every railgun on the Indomitable opened up at once. The metal slugs crossed the short distance in microseconds, slamming into the flagship's forward shields with devastating force. But Thexral was ready this time. "Return fire! All forward batteries!" The space between the ships became a storm of energy and metal. The Indomitable's shields flared and sparked under the massive assault, while the Vorthak flagship's armor buckled under the railgun barrage. Both ships were dying, but neither would surrender. It was a contest of will as much as firepower, and in that contest, humans had advantages the Vorthak were only beginning to understand. "Hull breach on deck 7, reported young me. "Emergency bulkheads holding, but we're losing atmosphere." "Quantum drive is offline," added Hyejin. "We're dead in space until I can restart it." Captain Minho looked around his bridge. His ship was crippled, his crew was injured, and they were facing the most powerful warship in the Vorthak fleet. By any logical measure, they should surrender. Instead, he smiled. "Well, crew, looks like we're going to find out just how tough humans really are." The Indomitable drifted in space, its quantum drive dead and its hull bleeding atmosphere from a dozen holes. On any other ship, with any other crew, this would have been the moment of surrender. But Dr. Yoonji was moving through the damaged sections with her medical team, treating wounded crew members who refused to leave their posts. "You need to get to the medical bay," she told Engineer Kim Woo, who was holding a plasma torch with one hand while the other hung useless at his side. "Can't, Doc," he replied, sparks flying as he welded a patch over a hull breach. "If I don't fix this hole, we'll lose the whole compartment." Yoonji looked at his injury, a dislocated shoulder and possible concussion. In the Vorthak military, he would have been declared unfit for duty and removed from his station. But humans had a different way of measuring fitness. "At least let me give you something for the pain," she said. Kim Woo grinned despite his injuries. "Pain lets me know I'm still alive, Doc. Save the medicine for someone who really needs it." This was happening throughout the ship. Crew members with broken ribs stayed at their stations. Engineers with burns on their hands kept working on repairs. Communications officers with ringing ears from explosions continued monitoring alien transmissions. On the bridge, Captain Minho was watching his tactical display with growing amazement. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the human fleet was not just holding its own, but actually gaining ground. "Report from the fleet," announced Jae-woo. "The destroyer Courage has disabled a Vorthak heavy cruiser. The corvette group led by Captain Jun-ho has destroyed 2 enemy frigates. And, sir, we're getting volunteer ships from the outer colonies." "Volunteers?" "Civilian vessels, sir. Cargo haulers, mining ships, even some passenger transports. They're asking permission to join the fight." Min-ho felt his throat tighten with emotion. These weren't military vessels. They were ordinary people with families and jobs. Flying ships never meant for combat, but they were coming anyway, because Earth was their home, too. On the Vorthak flagship, Fleet Admiral Thexral was experiencing something completely outside his understanding. His intelligence reports had said the humans were a young species, barely unified, prone to fighting among themselves. Instead, he was watching them display a level of cooperation and sacrifice that defied all logic. "Sir," his communications officer reported nervously, "we're intercepting human transmissions throughout the system. They're singing." "Singing?" "Yes, sir. Multiple ships are broadcasting the same song. I think it's some kind of battle hymn." Thexral listened to the translated lyrics flowing across his speakers. The words spoke of home, of standing together, of never giving up even when facing impossible odds. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The Vorthak had war chants, too, but they were about victory and conquest. These humans were singing about something else entirely, about dying if necessary to protect what they loved. "Admiral," his tactical officer said quietly, 3 more of our ships are requesting permission to withdraw for repairs. The humans are targeting our damaged vessels specifically, trying to force us to retreat." But Thexral couldn't retreat. 300 years of Vorthak expansion depended on the myth of their invincibility. If word spread that a single human ship had stood against his entire fleet and survived, every conquered world would rise in rebellion. "No retreat," he commanded. "All ships will continue the attack." On the Indomitable, Chief Engineer Hae-jin was working miracles in the engine room. The quantum drive had been pushed beyond all safe limits, but she was slowly bringing it back online with spare parts and desperate ingenuity. "Hae-jin to bridge," she called. "I've got the drive working again, but it's not stable. We might get 1 more jump, maybe 2 before it explodes." "That's all we need," Min-ho replied. "Stand by." He was planning something that would either save them or destroy them completely. But first, he had something else to do. "Jae-woo, open a channel to the Vorthak flagship." "Channel open, sir." "Fleet Admiral Thexral, this is Captain Min-ho. I want to make you an offer." On the alien ship, Thexral was surprised to hear from the human commander. "What kind of offer?" "Surrender now, and we'll let your fleet leave our system unharmed. Your ships are damaged. Your crews are demoralized, and you're fighting an enemy you clearly don't understand. Take your losses and go home." The bridge of the Vorthak flagship fell silent. In 300 years of conquest, no enemy had ever offered terms to them. They were always the ones demanding surrender. "You are in no position to make demands, human," Thexral replied, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Aren't we?" Min-ho asked. "Look around you, Admiral. You're perfect. Formation is broken. Your ships are scattered. Your crew is questioning orders for the first time in their lives. You came here expecting an easy conquest, but instead you found something you've never faced before. And what is that? A species that fights hardest when things look hopeless. A people who get stronger when you hurt them. You can destroy our ships, Admiral, but you can't destroy our spirit. And that spirit will spread to every world you've conquered." Thexral knew the human was right. Already his communications officers were reporting increased chatter from occupied systems. News of the battle was spreading, and the conquered species were asking questions. If humans could resist the Vorthak, why couldn't they? But surrender was impossible. The Vorthak Empire would not survive such a blow to its reputation. "We will never surrender to an inferior species," Thexeral declared. "Then you've learned nothing from this fight," Minho replied sadly. "Jae-woo, close the channel!" The human captain turned to his crew. They were battered, exhausted, and facing an enemy that still outnumbered them. But their eyes were bright with determination. "People," he said, "we've done something today that no one thought possible. We've shown the galaxy that humans don't break, but the fight isn't over yet." He looked at each of them. Young Me at tactical, despite the blood running from a cut on her forehead. Hyun-woo at weapons, his left arm in a makeshift sling but his right hand steady on the controls. Tae-hyun at navigation, calculating impossible maneuvers with a smile on his face. "We have one quantum jump left. I'm going to use it to ram the Vorthak flagship. The explosion should be big enough to cripple their fleet." The bridge went quiet. Everyone understood what he was saying. It was a suicide mission. "Sir," said Young Me quietly, "what about the escape pods?" Minho shook his head. "If we abandon ship, the Vorthak will just shoot down the pods. This is the only way to make sure our sacrifice counts." To his surprise, no one argued. No one asked to be transferred off the ship. No one suggested running away. Instead, Engineer Kim Woo's voice came over the intercom from his damage control station. "Captain, this is Kim Woo. The hull breach repair team wants you to know we're honored to serve with you." Similar messages began coming in from all over the ship. The medical team, the weapons crews, the communications specialists, even the cooks in the galley sent their respects. Dr. Yoon-ji arrived on the bridge, having finished treating the wounded. "Captain, if you're planning what I think you're planning, I want to be here for it." "Doc, you should be in the medical bay." She smiled and took her station. "Where else would I be? My crew is here." As the Indomitable prepared for its final mission, similar scenes were playing out throughout the human fleet. Damaged ships that should have retreated stayed in the fight. Crews that should have been overwhelmed by superior numbers found new reserves of strength. And on the edges of the solar system, more ships were arriving. Not just human vessels, but ships from some of the species the Vorthak had conquered. Word was spreading. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone was finally fighting back. The tide of the battle was about to turn, but Captain Minho and his crew were ready to pay the ultimate price to make it happen. Just as Captain Minho was about to give the order for their final quantum jump, new contacts appeared on the Indomitable's sensors. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, but these weren't Vorthak reinforcements. "Captain," Navigator Tae-hyun called out with excitement in his voice, "we've got incoming ships from the outer colonies. Looks like the entire Titan mining fleet, plus cargo haulers from Jupiter Station and... Sir, those are Martian defense ships." Communications Officer Jae-woo was monitoring multiple frequencies at once. "Sir, I'm getting transmissions from all over the system, colony ships, research vessels, even some deep space explorers. Everyone's coming home to fight." Minho stared at his tactical display as dozens of new contacts appeared. These weren't warships. Most were civilian vessels hastily fitted with whatever weapons their crews could find. Mining ships with industrial lasers, cargo haulers with improvised missile launchers, research vessels carrying experimental weapons that had never been tested in combat. Admiral So Young's voice came over the fleet communication channel. This is Admiral So Young to all vessels, military and civilian. Welcome to the battle for Earth. Civilian ships, you are under no obligation to engage the enemy. You may withdraw at any time. The response came not from the ship commanders, but from individual crew members throughout the civilian fleet. This is Chief Engineer Boram of the mining ship Deep Digger. We didn't come all the way from Titan to run away now. Cargo hauler Steel Wind reporting, we've got a full load of metal ingots that make excellent projectiles. Research vessel New Horizon here. We've been working on gravity manipulation technology. Time to see if it works on alien ships. Minho felt a wave of emotion wash over him. These people had families, jobs, lives that had nothing to do with war. But they had come anyway, because Earth was their home and humanity was their family. Change of plans, he announced to his crew. We're not going on a suicide run. We're going to win this battle. On the Vorthak flagship, Fleet Admiral Thexral watched in growing horror as more and more human ships appeared on his sensors. His fleet was already damaged and demoralized, and now they were facing an enemy that seemed to multiply like some unstoppable plague. How many ships do they have? He demanded. Over 200 now, sir, reported his tactical officer, but most appear to be civilian vessels with minimal weapons. Then why are my captains reporting increasing casualties? The answer came from the battlefield itself. The civilian ships were fighting with a creativity that confounded Vorthak tactical. Computers. Mining vessels used their industrial equipment to tear apart enemy hulls. Cargo ships rammed Vorthak fighters, accepting their own destruction to take out more expensive enemy vessels. Most terrifying of all was the research ship New Horizon, commanded by Chief Scientist Boram. Her team had been working on experimental gravity weapons, and now they were testing them on live targets. Gravity mine deployed, Boram announced calmly as her ship released a small device near a group of Vorthak cruisers. Effect in 3, 2, 1. Space twisted. The gravity mine created a localized field that pulled the 3 enemy ships together with irresistible force. They collided in a tangle of twisted metal and escaping atmosphere. Fascinating, Boram observed, making notes even as enemy fire bracketed her ship. The gravitational distortion exceeded our calculations by 30%. Her crew looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. Only a human scientist would conduct research in the middle of a space battle. Meanwhile, the fighter squadrons led by pilot Seung-ho were demonstrating another uniquely human characteristic, the willingness to attempt impossible maneuvers just to see if they would work. Tiger Squadron, follow my lead, Seung-ho broadcast, as he led his small fighters in a suicidal charge against a Vorthak battleship. We're going to thread the needle. Threading the needle was a maneuver that involved flying through the gaps in enemy fire while shooting at close range. It required split-second timing, perfect coordination, and a complete disregard for personal safety. The Vorthak gunners had never faced anything like it. Their weapons were designed to track logical flight patterns, not the seemingly random movements of human pilots who flew by instinct rather than computer calculation. Seung-ho's squadron made it through the defensive fire and launched their missiles at point-blank range. The Vorthak battleship, designed to withstand attacks from other capital ships, was torn apart by weapons that should have been too small to matter. "How?" whispered Thexral as he watched another of his ships die. His science officer had been studying the humans throughout the battle. "Sir, I believe their unpredictability is actually a form of evolved strategy. Their species developed in an environment where survival required constant adaptation." Explain. They don't follow standard tactical doctrine because they've never had one standard. Every human commander fights differently, uses different techniques, tries different approaches. Our computers can't predict their actions because there are no patterns to predict. Thexral was beginning to understand. The Vorthak had conquered the galaxy by being bigger, stronger, and more organized than everyone else, but they had never faced an enemy that was more adaptable. The tide of battle was turning. Vorthak ships that had seemed invincible were being destroyed by opponents they should have easily defeated. The mighty fleet that had conquered 400 worlds was being beaten by a mix of military vessels and civilian ships, crewed by people who had never seen combat before. "Sir," his communications officer reported nervously, "we're receiving transmissions from some of our conquered territories. Several worlds are declaring independence. Others are demanding our immediate withdrawal." This was Thexaral's worst nightmare. The Vorthak Empire was built on fear and the myth of invincibility. If that myth was shattered here, 300 years of conquest would crumble overnight. But even as his empire began to fall apart, Thexaral found himself fascinated by these humans. They fought with such passion, such creativity, such complete disregard for conventional wisdom. In 3 centuries of war, he had never encountered anything like them. On the Indomitable, Captain Minho was coordinating the final phase of the battle. The Vorthak fleet was scattered and confused, but they were still dangerous. "All ships, this is Minho. The enemy is breaking formation. Stay coordinated, watch each other's backs, and remember what we're fighting for." Chief Engineer Hyajin had managed to fully repair the quantum drive using parts cannibalized from other systems. "Captain, the drive is stable again. Where do you want to go?" Minho looked at the tactical display. The Vorthak flagship was still the most dangerous enemy on the field, but it was isolated now, cut off from its escort ships by the swirling chaos of battle. "Put us right next to their command ship, Hyajin. It's time to end this." "Aye, sir. Quantum jump in 3, 2, 1. The Indomitable vanished from its position and reappeared alongside the massive Vorthak flagship. The 2 ships were so close that their hulls almost touched, too close for the larger ship's main weapons to target the smaller vessel. "Hyunwoo, everything we have right into their bridge section," Minho ordered. The railguns spoke their final word in the battle, sending metal slugs through the flagship's weakened shields and into its command center. Lights died throughout the massive vessel as critical systems failed. On the dying Vorthak ship, Fleet Admiral Thexral lay on the deck of his ruined bridge, looking up at the stars through a gaping hole in the hull. His mighty fleet was destroyed or scattered. His empire was crumbling. And it had all been done by a species he had thought was primitive. But as he prepared to die, Thexral felt something he had never experienced before: respect for an enemy. These humans had shown him that there were things more powerful than weapons or technology. They had fought with courage, creativity, and most importantly, with love for something greater than themselves. Perhaps, he thought as consciousness faded, the galaxy was ready for a new kind of civilization. One built not on conquest, but on the strange human concepts of cooperation and sacrifice. The battle for Earth was almost over, but its consequences would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Fleet Admiral Thexral was not dead, though he wished he was. Emergency life support kept him breathing in the ruins of his command bridge, and through the hole torn in his ship's hull, he could see the continuing battle. His once mighty fleet was scattered and broken, but the fighting continued. Subcommander Kethamore had taken command of the surviving Vorthak ships. He was young for a fleet officer, promoted quickly through the ranks during the long years of easy conquest. Now he faced something no Vorthak commander had ever dealt with, the possibility of total defeat. "Sir," his communications officer reported, 7 ships are requesting permission to retreat. 2 more have gone silent. The humans are systematically hunting down our damaged vessels. Kethmore looked at his tactical display. The humans had them surrounded and outnumbered now. Logic dictated immediate withdrawal to preserve what remained of their forces. But Vorthak doctrine demanded victory, and retreat would mean admitting defeat to a supposedly inferior species. "All ships maintain formation," he ordered. "We will not surrender to these creatures." On the Indomitable, Captain Minho was watching. The same tactical situation from the human perspective. The Vorthak fleet was cornered but still dangerous. Their remaining ships were clustering together in a defensive formation, like wounded animals preparing for a final stand. "Captain," reported Tactical Officer Youngmi, "the enemy ships are powering up their main weapons. I think they're planning a last desperate assault." Minho nodded grimly. He had hoped the Vorthak would see reason and surrender, but it seemed they would fight to the death rather than accept defeat. That meant more human lives would be lost in the final phase of the battle. "All ships, prepare for enemy counterattack," he broadcast to the human fleet. "Stay alert and watch for—" His warning was cut off as the Vorthak ships suddenly broke formation and charged directly at Earth. They were no longer trying to win the battle. They were trying to destroy the planet itself. "Kamikaze run," whispered Navigator Tae-hyun. "They're going to ram the planet." The remaining Vorthak ships, led by Sub-Commander Kethmore's cruiser, accelerated toward Earth at maximum speed. Their weapons fired wildly in all directions, not trying to hit specific targets, but just to clear a path through the human fleet. On Earth, Admiral So Young watched the enemy ships diving toward her world like meteors of destruction. The planet's defense systems opened fire, but they weren't designed to stop ships moving at ramming speed. "All available ships, intercept those vessels," she commanded. "Do not let them reach the planet." The response was immediate. Human ships throughout. The system changed course to intercept the Vorthak death charge. Military vessels, civilian ships, even damaged craft that could barely maneuver. All of them moved to block the enemy's path to Earth. Captain Minho looked at his crew. The Indomitable was fast enough to intercept the lead Vorthak ship, but it would mean flying directly into the path of several enemy vessels. The odds of survival were close to 0. "Hee-jin," he called to the engine room. "One more quantum jump. Put us directly in front of the lead enemy ship." "Sir," Engineer Hyojin replied. "The drive is already damaged from our last jump. Another quantum displacement might cause a complete containment failure." "What would that look like?" "A quantum explosion, sir. Big enough to destroy both ships and probably anything else within a few kilometers." Minho was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he looked around at his crew. Young Mi, still at her post despite her injuries. Hyun Woo, preparing weapons with his good arm. Tae-hyun, plotting their final course with a sad smile. Dr. Yoon-ji, who had come to the bridge to be with her friends. They all knew what he was thinking. They all knew what it would mean. "Captain," said Communications Officer Jae-woo quietly, "I've been monitoring civilian ship transmissions. They're all moving to intercept too. Every ship in the system is putting itself between the Vorthak and Earth. Through the bridge speakers, they could hear voices from across the human fleet. Mining ship Deep Digger moving to intercept, for Earth and humanity. Cargo hauler steel wind on collision course. See you on the other side. Research vessel New Horizon. Chief Scientist Boram, recording final notes. The gravitational effects of our sacrifice should create a barrier that the transmission cut off as Boram's ship rammed into a Vorthak frigate, creating a spectacular explosion that lit up space, like a new star. All around them, human ships were throwing themselves at the enemy charge. Civilian vessels that had never been meant for combat were deliberately colliding with Vorthak warships. Crews were dying to save a world they might never see again. On the Vorthak ship, Sub-Commander Kethmore watched in growing horror as human vessels kept appearing in his path. Each time his ships destroyed one, two more took its place. These creatures seemed to have no concept of self-preservation. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "the humans are deliberately ramming our ships. They're sacrificing themselves to stop us." "Keep firing," Kethmore ordered, but his voice was shaking. "Clear the path to their planet." But the path couldn't be cleared. For every human ship they destroyed, more appeared. The space between the Vorthak fleet and Earth was becoming a graveyard of ships, both human and alien, all tangled together. In a final desperate embrace, Captain Minho made his decision. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going to execute one final quantum jump directly into the path of the enemy flagship. The resulting explosion should stop their charge and save Earth." He paused, looking around at his crew one more time. "It's been an honor serving with all of you. Haye Jin, execute quantum jump on my mark." "Quantum drive ready, sir," came Heijin's steady voice from the engine room. "It's been an honor, Captain." Similar farewells came from throughout the ship. These people, who had started the day as ordinary crew members on a routine patrol, were about to become the heroes who saved their world. "Mark," said Minho. The Indomitable's quantum drive engaged one final time. The ship vanished from its position and reappeared directly in the path of Kethmore's flagship, so close that collision was inevitable. But something unexpected happened. Instead of ramming the Vorthak ship, the quantum drive's containment field finally failed. The explosion that followed was unlike anything seen in the battle so far. The quantum detonation tore a hole in space itself. The Vorthak flagship was caught in the gravitational distortion and torn apart at the molecular level. The other enemy ships, seeing their leader destroyed by an explosion that defied all known physics, finally broke and scattered. But amazingly, impossibly, the Indomitable survived. The quantum explosion had somehow created a protective bubble around the human ship, depositing it safely several kilometers away from the destruction. On the bridge, Captain Minho looked around in amazement. They were alive. Somehow, against all odds and expectations, they were still alive. "How?" asked Tactical Officer Young Madat Engineer Haijin's voice came over the intercom, filled with wonder. "Sir, I think the quantum field collapsed in on itself instead of exploding outward. We got caught in the implosion and ejected to safety. Is that even possible?" "Apparently it is, sir. I'm reading some very interesting data down here. I think we just accidentally discovered a new form of faster-than-light travel. Throughout the solar system, the remaining Vorthak ships were surrendering or fleeing. Their mighty fleet, which had conquered 400 worlds, had been broken by a species they had thought was primitive, but the cost had been enormous. Dozens of human ships had been destroyed. Hundreds of brave souls had given their lives to protect their home. The space around Earth was filled with debris and the wreckage of dreams. As Captain Minho surveyed the battlefield, he realized that this was only the beginning. Word of humanity's resistance would spread throughout the galaxy. Other conquered, Species would hear about the day a small blue planet said no to the Vorthak Empire and made it stick. The galaxy was about to change, and it would never be the same again. 3 months after the battle, Sub-Commander Kethmore sat in a human prison cell that was unlike any detention facility the Vorthak had ever built. The walls were painted in soft colors. There was a window that looked out on a garden. The guards brought him books to read and asked about his health. It made no sense to him. The Vorthak had never treated their prisoners with such care. Enemy captives were resources to be used, not individuals to be respected. But the humans seemed to think differently about everything. The door to his cell opened, and Dr. Yunji entered with her medical equipment. She had been treating his injuries since his capture, despite the fact that he was technically an enemy war criminal. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, checking his healing wounds with gentle hands. "Why do you do this?" Kethmore asked, a question that had been troubling him for weeks. "I came here to destroy your world. My people have conquered and enslaved hundreds of species. Why do you treat me with kindness?" Yunji was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Because you're hurt and I'm a doctor. It's what we do. But I'm your enemy." "You were my enemy," she corrected. "Now you're my patient. There's a difference." It was a very human distinction, and one that Kethmore was slowly beginning to understand. These creatures seemed to believe that enemies could become something else, given time and the right circumstances. Outside, the prison, the galaxy, was indeed changing. News of the Battle of Earth had spread faster than anyone expected. On worlds throughout Vorthak space, conquered species were asking the same question. If humans could resist the Empire, why couldn't they? The rebellion had started on Zephyr Prime, where the crystalline inhabitants had developed weapons based on human railgun technology. Within days, 3 more worlds had declared independence. Within weeks, entire sectors were in revolt. Captain Minho, now promoted to Admiral, stood on the bridge of the new flagship Unity as it traveled to the Kepler system. The ship was a joint human-alien construction, built with technology shared by species that had once been enemies. "Admiral," reported his new communications officer, a young woman named Sumi, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian Council. They're requesting our assistance in negotiating with the remaining Vorthak forces in their sector." Minho nodded. This was their new mission, not conquest, but mediation. The humans had discovered that their greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their technology, but their ability to bring different species together. "Set course for Zephyr Prime," he ordered, "and send a message to the Vorthak commanders there. Tell them we're coming to talk, not to fight." On Earth, Admiral So Young was meeting with representatives from dozens of species. The United Nations building had been expanded to accommodate delegates who didn't breathe oxygen, communicated through light patterns, or required specific gravity conditions. The Nexari delegate, a biomechanical creature that looked like living metal, was expressing concerns about the new galactic order. The Vorthak provided stability for 300 years. Without them, how do we prevent chaos? "The same way humans prevented chaos on Earth," So Young replied. "Through cooperation, negotiation, and the understanding that all species have the right to determine their own destiny." It wasn't an easy process. Some species had been under Vorthak rule for so long that they didn't know how to govern themselves. Others were eager for revenge against their former oppressors. A few wanted to become conquerors themselves. But slowly, patiently, the humans worked to build something new. They shared their technology freely, but more importantly, they shared their ideas about democracy, individual rights, and peaceful coexistence. Chief Engineer Hyejin, now leading a research team that included scientists from a dozen different worlds, was working on projects that would have been impossible under Vorthak rule. The quantum drive technology discovered during the battle was being developed into faster, safer methods of space travel. The key, she explained to her multi-species team, is that each species brings something unique to the project. Zephyrian crystal matrix calculations, Nexari biomechanical interfaces, human intuitive problem solving. Together, we can achieve things none of us could manage alone. It was a revolutionary concept in a galaxy that had been ruled by conquest for centuries. Instead of forcing everyone to conform to one standard, the new alliance celebrated differences and found ways to make them work together. Back in his cell, Kethmore was reading a book about human history. The stories fascinated and horrified him in equal measure. These creatures had indeed spent most of their existence fighting each other, just as Vorthak intelligence had reported, but they had also spent that time learning, growing, and eventually finding ways to overcome their differences. "We made a mistake," he said during one of his conversations with Dr. Yunji. "We thought your wars made you weak, but they made you strong." "How do you mean?" "Every conflict taught you something new. Every enemy became a teacher. You learned to adapt, to change, to find solutions that no one had tried before." He paused, looking out the window at the garden where human children played alongside young Zephyrians and Nexari. "We Vorthak stopped learning 300 years ago. We thought we had found the perfect way to live, so we never changed." "It's not too late," Yunji said gently. "You can still learn. You can still change." Kethmore considered this. In Vorthak culture, change was seen as weakness, adaptation as failure. But watching these humans had shown him a different perspective. "What would happen," he asked carefully, "if I wanted to help? If some Vorthak wanted to be part of this new galaxy you're building?" "Then you'd be welcome," Yunji replied without hesitation. "Everyone gets a second chance here, even former enemies." 6 months later, Kethmore stood on the bridge of a ship crewed by humans, Zephyrians, Nexari, and 3 other species that had once been subjects of the Vorthak Empire. He wore the uniform of the new Galactic Cooperation Council, and his job was to help negotiate peaceful transitions for Vorthak worlds that wanted to join the Alliance. It was difficult work. Many Vorthak still believed in the old ways of conquest and domination. But slowly, some were beginning to see the advantages of cooperation over conflict. "Sir," reported the ship's navigation officer, a Zephyrian named Crystal Song of Wind, "we're approaching the Turtok system. The Vorthak garrison there has agreed to peaceful negotiations." "Good," Kethmore replied. "Send them a message. Tell them that former Subcommander Kethmore requests permission to come aboard and discuss the future." The response came quickly. "Permission granted. We're curious to hear what you have to say." As their ship approached the Vorthak station, Kethmore thought about the journey that had brought him here. A year ago, he had been a loyal officer in a conquering fleet, convinced that might made right, and that the strong should rule the weak. Now he was an ambassador for a new kind of civilization, one built on the radical human idea that different species could work together as equals. It was harder than conquest, messier than domination, but it was also more rewarding than anything he had ever experienced. The galaxy was changing, one world at a time, one mind at a time. And at the center of it all were the humans who had taught everyone that sometimes the smallest ship, crewed by the most ordinary people, could change the course of history. Captain Minho, now Admiral Minho, received regular reports from across the galaxy. Worlds joining the alliance, former enemies becoming friends, species that had never met before sharing knowledge and culture. But his favorite reports came from Earth itself, where the first generation of children who had grown up, knowing that aliens existed, were now playing games with young beings from dozens of different worlds. They spoke multiple languages, understood different cultures, and took for granted the idea that the galaxy was a place of cooperation rather than conquest. "They're the future," he told Captain Subin during one of their meetings. Subin had survived the ramming attack that destroyed her ship and now commanded one of the new multi-species exploration vessels. "They'll probably do things we can't even imagine," Subin agreed. "Growing up in a galaxy where everyone works together instead of fighting each other?" "I hope so," Minho replied, looking out at the stars. "We've given them a chance to build something better than what came before. Now it's up to them to make it work." The Vorthak Empire had conquered worlds easily for 300 years, but they had never encountered anything like the human spirit, stubborn, adaptable, and utterly unwilling to accept that things had to stay the way they were. Now the galaxy belonged to everyone, and the future was full of possibilities that no single species could have imagined alone. The age of conquest was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and it all started with one small ship that refused to get out of the way.